Space dogs. What only Belka and Strelka saw up there. 1. Pause to the stars. The impossible flight of Belka and Strelka. August 19, 1960. The barren desert of Baikonur, Soviet Kazakhstan. The pre-dawn darkness is sliced by powerful lights, bathing the massive, phallic silhouette of a Vostok rocket. Inside, 2 occupants waited, Belka, Whitey, and Strelka, Little Arrow. 2 2.5-year-old stray dogs weighing only a few kilograms, dressed in custom-made spacesuits. A few meters away, a red shimmer. It was the glow of the engines, about to set the sky ablaze in the name of communist supremacy. In Washington, D.C., the American High Command, and then Vice President Richard Nixon, held a cynical and humiliated view of the Soviet space race. The success of Sputnik, and in 1957, the tragic orbital flight of Laika, the first living creature to circle the Earth, had been public humiliations. The enemy, in this case the Western Bloc, had underestimated the Russian tenacity and ingenuity in using marginal resources. Western speech, skeptical and political voice, CIA report excerpt, 1958. The Soviets sacrificed Laika. It is proof of their indifference to life. They can send objects, but their re-entry technology is unviable for living beings, whether man or animal. The next crewed flight will be at best a suicide mission. It is a game of Russian roulette and propaganda. The American leadership ignored the obsession of the chief engineer, Sergei Korolev, to correct the mistake of Laika. For Korolev, the 1957 tragedy had transformed into a technical and moral imperative. The next cosmonaut, human or canine, would have to return alive.
The project is born, the logistics of return. The project that sent Belka and Strelka to space was no longer just about orbiting, it was about recovery. Since the early 1950s, the Soviets had used dogs, Moscow strays as they were small, hardy, and already acclimatized to hostile environments, as test pilots. The new objective, initiated after Laika, was to master the technology of the re-entry capsule and parachute. The Sputnik 5 or Vostok 1K project faced critical difficulties in training and engineering. Extreme acceleration, the dogs had to withstand massive G-forces. Training involved confinement in small containers and long sessions in centrifuges to simulate launch. Nutrition and monitoring, the animals were taught to eat a high-nutrient gelatinous paste from an automatic dispenser, essential for survival in microgravity. Initial failures in the dispenser and monitoring were frequent. Laika's failure, the thermal failure of Laika's spacecraft, which resulted in overheating and her death in orbit, hung over the team. The criticism was the Politburo's pressure to prioritize propaganda over safety. Technical report, Baikonur Team 1960, confidential. Strelka and Belka's cerebral EEG and cardiac ECG monitoring parameters are stable during simulation. However, the precision of the deceleration system and the resistance of the thermal shield upon re-entry remain the critical point. The failure rate in capsule tests is unacceptably high. Success is not guaranteed.
The transformation of perception and the video signal. Hope lay in monitoring technology. For the first time, the Vostok capsule was equipped with a TV camera that would send images of the dogs back to Earth. In the control center, scientists watched. After the initial stress of launch, respiratory and heart rate spiking, the dogs calmed down. The flight went well for hours, proving that microgravity was not fatal. But on the 4th orbit, the TV transmission showed Belka suddenly anxious, barking, and seemingly nauseous. The sight of Belka in distress led scientists to a critical decision that would change the fate of humanity in space. That small bark in the cosmos was the first warning. It caused the project heads to make an immediate, technical decision to limit Yuri Gagarin's inaugural flight to just a single orbit. The miracle of Baikonur was about to materialize. The return of Belka and Strelka would not only save the 2 dogs, it would, indirectly save the first man to see Earth from space. 2. The secret laboratory, training, and biology. The preference for strays. The Soviet space program did not choose purebred dogs. The choice fell on female strays from Moscow based on strict technical and biological criteria. 1. Resilience. Street dogs were considered more resistant to extreme environments and deprivation, crucial for survival in an initial flight capsule. 2. Dimensions. The Vostok capsules were small. The dogs had to weigh between 5 and 7 kilograms and be up to 35 centimeters tall. 3. Hygiene. Females were preferred because they had simpler excrement and urine collection systems that were easier to adapt to the tight spacesuits. Belka and Strelka, both around 2.5 years old, were selected for their docile temperament and learning ability.
The psychological mechanical training. The training of the Cosmo dogs was a process of desensitization and extreme conditioning vital for collecting untainted data. Confinement. The dogs were kept in increasingly small metal boxes for long periods to simulate the flight capsules. This induced claustrophobia, but was essential to accustom them to immobilization. Acceleration and vibration. Intensive sessions in centrifuges simulated the massive G-forces of launch, exposing the animals to extreme physiological stress, and vibrating tables imitated the rocket's noise and tremor. Automatic nutrition. They were conditioned to feed on a high-fiber and protein gelatinous paste delivered by an automatic dispenser necessary to avoid digestive problems. Belka and Strelka were lucky. Over 60% of the program's dogs suffered from chronic constipation upon returning to base. The Ark capsule. Sputnik 5 or Korabl Sputnik 2 did not just carry Belka and Strelka. The mission was a biological Noah's Ark, a flying laboratory to test mass survival before the human mission. The cargo included mice, rats, rabbits, fruit flies, insects, plants, seeds, fungi, and microbe cultures. The survival of each organism would provide a piece of the biological puzzle of spaceflight. Technical monitoring. Monitoring technology was the crucial point for the crewed flight. Electrodes and sensors were implanted in the dogs and their suits to provide continuous data. ECG, electrocardiogram, measurement of heart rate and pulse. EEG, electroencephalogram, monitoring of brain activity to assess the level of stress and neurological adaptation to microgravity. Blood pressure and respiration. Sensors detailed the cardiovascular and pulmonary reaction to weightlessness and vibrations. This data, transmitted via telemetry, was the true payload of the mission, the technical proof that a complex organism could survive the journey. The post-launch reaction. As expected, the launch caused massive spikes in Belka and Strelka's heart rate and respiration, but in orbit, both calmed down, consumed the gelatinous paste, and apparently interacted with the mice and insects in their module. The breaking point. Fourth orbit. The 25-hour 17-orbit mission was going perfectly until the fourth orbit. It was at this moment that the video transmission showed Belka reacting violently. The dog began to bark, thrash, and showed clear signs of nausea and disorientation. Although Strelka remained calm, Belka's behavior was a critical medical anomaly. The decision that saved history. Soviet scientists Sergei Korolev at the forefront analyzed the episode. The technical conclusion was direct. Although microgravity was not lethal, it could induce severe symptoms of disorientation and motion sickness that could compromise a human being's ability to operate the spacecraft. Based on Belka's anomaly, the medical and engineering team recommended to Korolev that Yuri Gagarin's orbital mission be limited to just a single complete orbit, a single loop, to minimize exposure to the unknown effect of prolonged microgravity. Belka's bark saved Gagarin from potentially debilitating stress. The mission continued, but the fate of the first man in space was already sealed by a stray dog's discomfort. 3. Re-entry and the end of the canine Cold War. The critical moment. The Vostok 5 mission lasted over 25 hours and completed 17 orbits around the Earth. On August 20, 1960, the most critical phase of the mission began – re-entry into the Earth's atmosphere. Laika's failure was not in orbit, but in the Soviet Union's inability to ensure safe re-entry. Belka and Strelka's success depended on new technology, a functional thermal shield, and a reliable ejection system. The landing protocol, the Vostok capsule, carrying its entire biological Noah's Ark, decelerated. At a predetermined altitude, the dogs were ejected from their capsule in a pressurized compartment, landing separately under parachutes. The result was a total triumph of Soviet engineering. Belka and Strelka, the mice, the rats, and all the biological cargo were recovered safe and sound.
The post-flight analysis. Immediate medical examinations revealed no serious anomalies in the dogs. The 700,000-kilometer flight proved that complex organisms could survive not only microgravity but also the G-forces of re-entry. This technical success gave Sergei Korolev the green light and the vital knowledge he needed for the next mission, to send Yuri Gagarin into space. The cultural phenomenon. Belka and Strelka became instant celebrities, not only in the USSR but worldwide. Their images, the two smiling strays dressed in their spacesuits, were published on stamps, postcards, toys, and even Gzell ceramics. They were the docile and victorious face of Soviet technological superiority. Propaganda tours. The dogs embarked on media tours presented by scientists like Dr. Oleg Gazenko. The focus was twofold: to show the USSR and recovery capability and, more subtly, to humanize the relentless space race that had cost Laika's life. The diplomatic gesture, Pushinka. Several months after the flight, Strelka gave birth to a litter of 6 healthy puppies. This fact was a crucial biological datum, proving that space travel did not compromise mammalian fertility. In 1961, Soviet Prime Minister Nikita Khrushchev turned science into diplomacy. He gifted one of the puppies, a female named Pushinka, meaning fluffy, to U.S. President John F. Kennedy. The CIA subterfuge. Pushinka, upon arriving at the White House, was subjected to a full inspection by the CIA and the Secret Service, including X-rays and magnetometer tests, for fear that the puppy contained Soviet listening devices. Pushinka was cleared and lived in the White House, mating with Charlie, the Kennedy family dog. Their puppies were affectionately nicknamed Pupniks, a play on words merging the Soviet satellite's name with the American dog. Pushinka's gift was one of the rare and endearing gestures of conciliation during the height of the Cold War.
Gagarin's debt. Belka and Strelka, the Moscow strays, accomplished their mission perfectly. They proved that complex life could survive microgravity and return. Their flight did not just make history, it shaped the future. The anomaly of Belka, the dog that barked with nausea on the 4th orbit, was the direct technical reason why Yuri Gagarin completed only a single orbit on his historic mission in April 1961. The lasting impact. Although Laika remains the most famous martyr, Belka and Strelka are the true heroines of the return. Their stuffed bodies are now displayed at the Museum of Cosmonautics Memorial in Moscow, honored as national treasures. The success of the 1960 mission cemented Soviet leadership in the space race and, above all, demonstrated that humanity could indeed venture into the void of the cosmos and return to tell the tale. They were strays without pedigree, but their flight was Gagarin's safety map. Belka and Strelka not only saw what only the stars can see, they brought back the undeniable proof that the final frontier was finally open.